Who wants to play Drink the Beer?
Right here.
You win.
All right, what do I win?
Another beer.
Oh, I'm going for the high score.
I like beer.
It makes me a jolly good fellow.
Hello. Everybody sing along here. We're going to talk about the sudzier side of life, the beer, the Super Bowl, oh, you name it. Yeah, we have Alex Davidson is joining us. He's from the Beer Institute. He's Director of Public Affairs. This is a Washington, D.C. trade association, and they say they represent the $331 billion beer industry, including 6,600 brewers and more than 2 million American jobs. Alex, it's good to have you with us. I want to get to the Super Bowl, but I want to remind our listeners, I'm sure you're well aware of this, it was kind of a rocky end of 2022 for beer, and we've talked about beer. As you can imagine, we collect data on all sorts of commodities here at Bloomberg. But this is, let me just do this quickly. This is from Nielsen. Beer prices at retail at the end of 2022 rose an average of 7%. Some beers like Bud Light, Miller Lite, and those even saw a greater rise, 10%. At the same time, there was also a decline in the volume of beer sold. So, you know, we've heard about this, the incursion of hard seltzer. Why don't you start with that, Alex? Give us a sense of where we're at right now with beer.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to thank you guys for having me. I know, beer is a popular topic, and I love to share the message with everyone. Beer is, it's like every other commodity in the United States right now. It's facing inflationary pressures, and, people are changing their habits. That being said, beer is strong. There obviously, we've seen some price hikes. Those things have happened. A lot of that has to do with supply chain. And one of the things that we've actually talked a lot about is tariffs on aluminum. So aluminum tariffs are driving up the cost of our inputs, and aluminum cans, bottles are the single greatest cost for beer producers. So we're looking at it, from a grain perspective, from a commodities, aluminum, glass, all of those things. But there's some easy steps that we think the administration could take to relieve some of that pressure on manufacturers and consumers.
So tell us about that. I mean, where does aluminum come from? I know it's derived, is it bauxite? Is that the ore?
So we're buying it primarily as a can sheet. So that's the aluminum that's either processed already into a can or in the process of becoming a can. Most of our aluminum comes from Canada.
Huh.
So when President Trump in 2018 put a 10% tariff on aluminum imports globally, and that drove up the cost of aluminum. Since then, we've kind of peeled back layers of the tariffs, but unfortunately, due to the way that it's structured and priced, aluminum producers are basically charging aluminum end users, including the beer industry, the same price regardless of tariffs. So we are paying unbelievably more for the aluminum that we're using. We actually calculated around the end of last year that the beer industry has paid an additional $1.7 billion in tariffs on aluminum that they purchased.
So, Alex, I'm sorry, go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was just going to say that, that's driving up the cost of manufacturing, which then trickles down through the entire supply chain down to consumers. So, it's something that we think could, is done with a pen. It can be removed with a pen.
So, aluminum remains, though, cheaper than bottles.
Well, the big thing that we've seen is that aluminum has become the predominant supply option. People like to have their beer out of cans. It's stackable. It's lower. It's easier to ship. It's less weight. But on top of that, that's what consumers want. It's a different packaging. Over the last few years, we've seen that now 74% of all beer produced in the United States comes in aluminum, whether that's a can or a bottle.
Alex Davidson with us from the Beer Institute, and we're talking about, at the moment, about this high price of aluminum. I'm a bit surprised, Kevin. I'm not an expert on our relations to our neighbors up north, but it seems to me we enjoy a friendly back and forth with these folks, and
we definitely do.
So what is the problem?
So the problem is it's called the Midwest Premium, and it's a complex pricing structure. But right now, all people, regardless of whether or not they're buying recycled aluminum, if they're buying it from a non-tariff country, they pay one set rate. So it blurs the lines between tariff countries, non-tariffed countries, recycled content. driving up the cost for everybody.
So, Alex, let's talk a little bit, if we could, about the impact of the Super Bowl and Super Bowl week on the beer industry. How much, first off, will Americans spend on beer this week, and how much is consumed? Do you guys have stats
So
like that?
I got to say, it's the Super Bowl for beer, too. It's last year, Nielsen IQ said that people spent about $1.6 billion on beer, and that's just in the 2 weeks leading up. And that's actually, if you look at the locations that host the Super Bowl, that number jumps even higher. So we saw last year in LA that their beer sales went up 8%. So across the country, people are buying beer. It's by far the number one beverage that people are buying for their Super Bowl party, as long as it comes to alcohol. But the beer institute, we worked with Morning Consult last week and the week before to poll people and say, what is the best beverage to pair with football?
Interesting.
And I mean, beer was far and away the number one. 38% of Americans said beer was number one. The next one was 27% for soda. So when you think of Super Bowl, I think of chicken wings, I think of beer, and I think of football.
So can you give me some comparison, though? I know you said it was up 8% last year in LA, but give me some comparison, on opening day of football in September versus the Super Bowl.
I don't have the numbers specifically for that week, but this is, it was an 8% bump over what they would normally see for the Super Bowl. So it's a year over year. When you host the Super Bowl, you're going to see an 8 to 10% increase in the sales there. But this Super Bowl is one of our...
But is that nationwide as well, Alex?
So nationwide, there is a jump in sales. We saw a larger jump in the cities that host the Super Bowl. But it's one of the biggest beer occasions of the year. So you have the Super Bowl, you have the beginning of summer, Memorial Day, July 4th, are all really big beer holidays. In addition, obviously, the beginning of baseball season is a huge one, March Madness, St. Patrick's Day. So this is the first real big beer holiday of the year. It kind of cuts in between all of the cold months. It's something that people look forward to, and it's something that people often like to do at home.
Yeah.
This is something where they invite family and friends and love to cater it. And cold beer's definitely on the menu.
So Alex Davidson with us, Director of Public Affairs at the Beer Institute in D.C. Alex, we ran out a story today on Bloomberg that I found quite interesting. The headline, Booze Bounces Back in Super Bowl Ads as Crypto Bud Loosen Grip. So the upshot here is that in June, the Budweiser brewer, gave up its rights as the exclusive alcohol brand in the big game, giving other makers a turn in the spotlight. And as well, crypto has been on the downside. So all the crypto ads we saw last year, including the famous Larry David spot, they're gone. So this means, this is more exposure for your product.
It is, and I think that it's a reflection of where the world is. I think you looked at what was the national versus what are local buys. There have always been beer ads from multiple companies during the Super Bowl, whether it's the national or on the local. But it just creates more opportunity. Beer has some of the most creative ads. Back to the frogs back in the day, What's Up? And you saw these grow through the Super Bowl. This just creates more opportunity for different brewers to get involved in the conversation. I know that a lot of brewers are very excited to run national ads this year. And it really it reinforces that, this is a big thing for beer. I loved the Larry David ad last year. I think FTX obviously had a bad year after it, but
right.
Beer's one of the original beverages. And it's something that's been enjoyed for thousands of years. It's been instrumental in American history, and it's continuing to play a really strong role.
So, Alex, just a couple of minutes left here, but I want to talk about two, I guess I would call them headwinds or challenges to big beer, Budweiser and so forth. The first is the craft brewing. It seems like the research I've read for this conversation, crafters are making more and more inroads into this market. Number two, and I started with this, hard seltzer. I mean, can you give us sort of the lowdown on both?
Sure. So I think craft beer, it's never been a better time to be a beer fan. There's more brewers. I think you started off by saying there's 6,600 brewers across the United States. That's in every congressional district, every neighborhood. There's beer. So it's just created more opportunity. I think that people, their tastes have changed. And I think that, brewers, both large and small, have adapted to fit the consumer. And that goes into the second question. So seltzer. Seltzer is something that we are actually really proud of. Most seltzer is malt-based, which means that legally it's considered beer.
So hold on a minute. You're taking credit for seltzer now. Is that it? You're the Beer Institute.
We are the Beer Institute, but a lot of our companies are beverage companies, so they're producing.
If you can drink it,
more than core beer.
Sure.
No, I'm funning with you, but
of course.
Yeah, I mean it is a malt beverage. So do you tally up hard seltzer and all your stats and everything?
We do. So that's something that we've seen.
So there's
in the
no
last few
problem.
years it is considered beer. It is malt-based, and it's something that brewers are producing. That being said, that there are some challenges and some headwinds we've seen. The liquor industry is trying to pass off spirits-based drinks as beer, trying to get tax rates lowered. Mm-hmm. But, beer is a set, defined thing, and we think that we do it better, and we don't want to blur those lines. So as far as it goes for seltzer, we're just giving consumers more options for what they want.
All right. Alex Davidson with the Beer Institute. It's a pleasure, sir. You came with good information. We appreciate the